Good evening. Thank you. So I'm so glad that you're with us tonight. We want to give you a big welcome, especially for those who are visitors to the University of UPIKE. We're really excited to have some students from Michael High School, the best high school in UPIKE, right? Downtown UPIKE, right? I can say that without offending Pike Central. So we're glad that you guys are here. Also, tonight, we have a lot to offer. We want to make sure that our panelists have adequate time to kind of share and discuss. A couple of things about tonight's event. This is a part of a larger stream known as Religious Emphasis Week, where we've been looking at the theme of how faith is used as the power or the thought process behind making positive good in your community because of our Presbyterian founders, those who are deeply committed to their Christian faith and founding our institution and designing our institution around that. We believe that faith really matters. And in our world today, we think that there's great truth and value and many voices at the table. So tonight is not a debate. Tonight is a dialogue where we're going to hear from persons who are practitioners. Of course, they will not be able to, with complete total authority, speak on behalf of every person who has ever followed or currently is a part of their movement, because there is no person who can speak on behalf of an entire group of people, kind of authoritatively, I guess, because there's much variety even within different traditions. So tonight before you're going to have a bulletin that's going to kind of explain who our panelists are. In a few minutes, they're going to tell us a little bit more about themselves and which traditions they'll be talking about tonight. I want to go over a couple of ground rules first. Many of you may have a cell phone. We ask you to put that on vibrate or turn it off. And every time I say that, there's always the person who gets 12 phone calls and has it up on Motley Crue or something, and you have a beep in your purse. So just make sure you look at it and kind of turn it down. We don't want to mess up the movement of our events tonight. Also, your bladder may speak to you at some point in this evening. And if that's the case, immediately to your left, my right, there are, out of these doors here, there's going to be bathrooms, both men and women, so please feel free to use that. Later in the evening, as we get close to the close of our event, we will then open the floor to some questions. Maybe you have some questions that you would just love to ask. And with that, the only thing that we ask is that you would make sure that you ask a question as opposed to making a statement. We want to make sure that our panelists have the opportunity to speak, so we ask that you would ask a question. One final thing. Tonight our panel was supposed to be with 5 persons. But unfortunately, based on some scheduling conflicts in the last second, a representative from the Islamic Cultural Center in Prestonsburg was not able to be with us. So tonight we want to make sure that you realize that our Islamic brothers and sisters are not present here, but are very vibrant in our community. They have a mosque in Prestonsburg rather than Adams Branch, and they send their greatest apologies for not being able to be here in the last moment. So my name is Rob, I'm the University Chaplain. I'll be kind of leading or asking the question, being the guy over here asking some questions, and I want to give some space now to our panel. So would you please welcome our panelists tonight? And we'll start out with something really light. If you would just tell us a little bit about yourself and which tradition that you'll be talking about tonight.
Good evening. My name is Toy Adams. I have a slight bit of an allergy thing, so just kind of look past that tonight. I had an allergy shot so I could be here, so pray to all the gods that may or may not exist. Yeah, so I'm a Christian. I'm a more progressive mainline Christian. I was raised in the United Methodist Church. So my views tonight probably won't speak to all Christians, probably a large group of Christians. But I hope that I can shed some clarity on some alternative branches within Christianity. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Devesh Sharma. I will be talking about Hinduism, and I work as a head surgeon at UPIKE Medical Center, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
My name is Chris Randall. I'm from Logan, Utah. You can read a little bit about what Christ of Latter-day Saints. Its inception in 1830, and many of you may have heard in your classes in elementary school in history about the Mormon pioneers. There were members of my ancestors and my wife's ancestors that crossed the plains, and so my parents continue that tradition, and I'm grateful to them for that. They've always taught me what's right and wrong, and handed me an easy path to the faith that I have.
Hi, my name is Matthijs Meyer. I'm representing, let me get the exact quote, I'm representing the voice of the spiritual, but not religious. And so my tradition is actually Calvinist. I grew up a Calvinist, spent some time in Laotian Buddhism, spent some time in the Catholic Church, and right now I'm a seeker. I'm comfortable with what I am. I'm not seeking a religion. I'm comfortable in my own spirituality, but I'm seeking. So that's my background. I'm also an evolutionologist here at UPIKE, and that's my work.
Thank you. Now, as we think about your own faith traditions and values, as you kind of self-identified, tell us about what does your tradition say about serving the poor and serving those who are in need? We'll start with you, if you never mind.
So serving the poor, having a mission, obviously anybody that is spiritual, that's looking for cohesion in their world, and I think it's an innate human desire is doing that. I think we take care of the poor, we have missions in our lives. For me, it really comes down that it's not prescribed to me. I do it because that's what we need to do. Our time, our place in time and space dictates that we do that. So I don't want to speak for other people that are spiritual but not religious, but for me, at least as an individual, that's essential. We do what's needed. You do what's needed to be done for those that has an experience.
Jesus Christ taught that inasmuch as you have done it to the least of these, my brother, you have done it unto me. And I think that we, as members of this church, take that very seriously. We try to treat everybody as Jesus would have treated them. Locally in our church, we have each month what we call Fast Sunday. The members of our church will go without food for 2 consecutive meals, and they will donate at the very least what they would have spent on those 2 meals, and we're going to encourage to donate more generously to the local church, and those funds are called fast offerings. The person serving currently in the position I do in church would then be responsible for seeking out the poor amongst our members of the church in this area, which is all of Pike County, and helping them in whatever way they need to. So locally, that's how we seek out the poor. Generally, the church has very, very large welfare resources. If you ever go to Salt Lake City, I encourage you to make a trip to the Welfare Square in Salt Lake City. Amazing facility where they're always preparing for natural disasters and having food ready, supplies ready in moments notice.
In the Hinduism, it's not any different than from other religions. I think all the religions talk about this, that we should help not only poor, but anybody who is weaker and anybody who can help. So in Hinduism, it goes not only for the poor human beings, but about anything like animals, birds, so normally the tradition is like in the morning, whenever you try to eat, you take out some part of the food for there are a lot of back home in India, there are a lot of stray animals, there are a lot of birds around the houses, so you just take out some food every day. And for the poor also, you just regularly kind of donate food, and there are a lot of, in the Hinduism, everything is kind of related to the gods, so there are a lot of festivals and there are a lot of fasts, and every time you take out some cloth or food and whatever that can be done to help the poor. And I think it's uniform, not, I don't think so, only in Hinduism, it's probably all the religions talk about.
So, in Christianity, the center of the faith being Jesus, it upholds that God was incarnated and most revealed in a poor Jewish peasant. So, at the center of our faith is God incarnated into a poor person. And like has been said on the panel so far, to serve the oppressed, to serve the least of these, is essential to what it means to be a Christian, in my opinion, in my tradition. And so I draw heavily on the Old Testament with scriptures in the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books, on the year of Jubilee, which was supposed to happen every 50th year. It was after 7 sabbatical years. It's when it was a day that was set aside mostly for the benefit of the poor, where the servants would be released for people that had no things that they needed, would be given things, they would be receive the justice that God had for them. And so Jesus in the Gospels presents that He's coming to fulfill Isaiah, He's coming to fulfill the prophets. It is the year of Jubilee, and it takes away sort of the time and makes it where it's an ongoing year of Jubilee. And the Holy Spirit coming at Pentecost, 50 days after the resurrection. So I think that at the center of our faith is a Trinitarian ethic of Jubilee, where we're supposed to give and distribute to everyone full equality and the things that they need for survival.
When we think about your faith traditions, one thing that I didn't start with that we should have was allowing you to tell us a little bit about what it means for you to be a part of that tradition. There's some persons tonight may say, I don't know what it means to be spiritual but not religious, or I don't know what it means to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So if you could tell us a little bit about what that means for you to be a part of that tradition.
I think to be part of the Christian tradition most generally means to follow Jesus in some form or another. There's many flavors of Christianity. As one of my undergraduate philosophy teachers always said, it's like an ice cream shop. There's all these different flavors. So what it looks like as far as certain doctrinal standards, certain ways of interpretation is completely up to the community that you're belonging to. But just generally, I would say to find some form of humanity and meaning within the stories of Jesus Christ, and that's essentially the general picture of what it means to be a Christian.
So my faith in the Hinduism is, obviously I was born and brought up as a Hindu, no, right? In the Hinduism it's not considered per se as a religion. There was no single person who started the religion. It's more like a philosophy which goes right from what you eat, what you do, or you do things like including simple day-to-day life to meditation and doing even guidelines for how you should do exercise, right from breathing exercise to all the yoga kind of things to kind of stabilize your mind. And like at different point of time you can pick up different things from that. So like if you are otherwise stressed out, you can pick up something from the meditation. If you are otherwise want to do something more different, like you can do some breathing exercises to stabilize your mind. And then in general, like following all the common things which are guided by all the religions, like showing your whatever, like the way we started to do anything that can be done to the poor people and to the wildlife, to the plants, and I think we can discuss this later on. But like how everything is kind of related, so that right from how to maintain the ecosystem.
We believe in our priority line of our family is most important, and then serving God, and then we have a responsibility to our employer. And so for me that means I have a wife and 6 children, and so that means I help them work on their jump shots, and I help them with their homework, and help mom with the chores and those kind of things, and set a good example for my children. So I Bible that we believe in having a lay clergy, which means that when people are called to positions by others in authority, we believe that they're called of God. And they're set apart by the laying on of hands by those that have authority to do so. And so we accept these callings voluntarily and accept all the responsibilities that go with them. So for example, right now I'm the branch president of the UPIKE branch. And it's very emotionally and time-consuming responsibility because people come to deal with their issues, their marital issues, their, I guess you could say, confessing sins, and just a wide variety of teaching responsibilities. But that means in 6 months I can be called to a different position where I teach the 3-year-old lessons on being grateful for fish or being grateful for their eyes. So it can go from what might be considered prominent by most people to what people would say this is just a menial position. And we gladly accept those kinds of responsibilities in the church. And then of course, because we're not paid for any of this activity or voluntary service, I have my job. I'm an anesthesiologist over at the hospital. And so it's a delicate balance that the members of our church are asked to do. And we believe that we're blessed to do it, and I can attest to that.
So for me, it comes down to a few things. And the first thing is my spirituality is all. I stand in awe every day when I stand in front of a group of students I teach them. I stand in awe when I look at nature. I stand in awe when I look at what's happening around me in the world. So it's all in service. That's where my spirituality comes from. I believe we're called to serve. I don't know why we're not called. That is the problem with spirituality, not religion. And I want to state this, that I don't have a problem with any organized religion. It never has been a problem. I don't have a dislike of religions. This comes from myself, where I feel I cannot stand in some of these groups. And in a nice way, what I'm trying to see is this all that has taken me out of some of the religious traditions I've been part of. This all pushes me to see that there's always something more. And so that's why we call ourselves seekers sometimes, because we're looking. And so oftentimes it feels that within some of the religious traditions, that's where the loneliness comes from, not being part of a tradition. Is that oftentimes we see in religions that people turn in a little bit inward. They have a community that supports them. But in my case, I found a great community here with my family at UPIKE. Many of the people that sit here on the stage with me are part, in a small way, of their communities too. Church of Latter-day Saints, through Diane and many of our friends. I spend time, my daughter actually does the body dance with your children. I don't know you that well, but I know Rob well, right? And so in a way that we share with everybody, I get to partake in many, many traditions. But it is about, I think, the whole that we see out there. It's easy, in my field, like I said, I'm an evolutionologist, it's very easy to become caught up in this idea. My students always ask me, do you believe in evolution? I don't. Evolution is a natural phenomenon we observe in nature. It comes from somewhere, the pull that I feel towards that is where the spirituality is.
And we'll start in the middle with this question and branch out rather than let these guys at the ends start everything. So in your own faith tradition, did your faith tradition guide you or direct you in any ways when you chose your vocation, or you felt some people say, I felt led to be, whatever my vocation is now. Did your faith tradition form any of that? And how do you do what you do now?
Yeah, well, I would say it probably did. I probably wanted to go to play college basketball. And so you may see the missionaries walking around town, the guys wearing white shirts and ties, and they're knocking on the doors and usually travel around in companionship too. When I graduated high school, I was 19 at the end of that summer, and so it was a decision whether I was going to go on a mission. And again, that's something voluntary you submit to, and you say, I'll go wherever, or to go play college basketball. And I would say that it very strongly affected how I made that decision, because there's nothing inherently wrong with playing college basketball. But where I was going, I could see the group that and the environment that was going to be there. And I could see that that wasn't consistent with my religious beliefs. And it would be very difficult to overcome that. Not to mention, we do believe that the 19-year-old young men should go on mission. And so I did. I was called to serve in the Dominican Republic. And they grow up a lot. And that's the case when I went on a mission. And we decided what really matters in life, and supporting family and getting a good job is going to be the most important for me. And so you come back really focused, and that's I think what started me in my career.
It's very difficult to decide. Like obviously you study and you decide you're going to be whatever you want to be, whether it's physician, engineer, basketball player. Somehow in the Hinduism there's a lot of emphasis on the destiny and on your karma, whatever it is. So that doesn't mean that you just sit down and say, okay, I will just wait what's there in my destiny. You just keep on doing what you're supposed to do. And then you follow, and then you see that life throws so many curveballs, and you just move in that direction. When I was in India, I just finished my plastic surgery residency, and I was just going to start becoming a plastic surgery attending, and suddenly got married, and my wife wanted to move to US. So just at the last minute, it was a decision that okay, no, probably I'm going to move to US, and then starting the whole residency again, which was not fun at all. But the whole emphasis, my faith is just that you should not resist. You just kind of serve like you serve in the sea. If you will start fighting with the waves, you will drown or you will fall. Whatever comes, you just take it and just do whatever is best for you. Means whatever best you can do to handle that situation, and just keep on moving.
So when I was a baby, I was baptized into the United Methodist Church. The pastor held me up in front of the congregation, as we do, and apparently said something creepy about how I was going to be special when I got older, or something like that. So I was pretty much marked. As I got older, I was in high school, and I became a high schooler. And then I went on to college, and it was kind of informed to me that it was relayed to me that I was going to be a pastor. And so I tried to pastor for, I would say, I think it was like 3 or 4 years. They would send me to rural churches where I was appointed to in eastern Kentucky. And I quickly learned that I'm not necessarily equipped spiritually or emotionally to be a full-time minister. So I was already too far in at that point into religious studies, so now I'm in seminary studying religion academically. I'm getting a master's of theological studies degree, and I plan to go into a PhD program, but I'd say that my calling has sort of, in a way, been manufactured in a lot of ways due to my religious environment. But the more in tune I become with myself spiritually and what I call God, when I pray to God, to whom I don't know what God is necessarily, I feel more called just to be a human being, just to experience life and to try to make the world a better place. So I guess where I'm at right now is directly affected by my religious upbringing, but not necessarily in a conventional way.
No. No, I mean, but the one thing that I found that maybe I come from a different way, I do believe what I do, what I ended up doing, has influenced my spirituality. So I don't think I became a teacher. I believe teachers are called. I was a research biologist for many years, ended up in Bible Kentucky on the work. And I honestly believe that spiritually I've grown significantly since I've been here.
Well, when we think about oftentimes in America, religion is oftentimes tied up with social issues, and oftentimes religion is used to define certain positions on social issues. And we know that this is not a night where we're going to scroll through our Facebook and try to figure out where everyone's at. But when we think of all the array of various social issues, I wonder for you, what is one big concern that you have and how you are trying to deal with it? And some of the things that I shared with you guys, we think about gun violence, gender issues, sexuality issues, peace and war, healthcare, drug addiction, etc. What is one big social issue that concerns you and you feel like you're seeking to deal with?
For me personally, I think all of those issues in a way, but overarching to that is the polarizing nature of our society, where you're either part or you're not part. We've moved away from the central core where people can sit and talk to each other and address these issues. And I think that silent majority is not a majority anymore, at least it feels like it. But we've got these extremely polarized groups, and when people can't sit on a stage like this, in most cases, and talk about the issues that you will bring up. And I think that is my greatest concern. I think it's becoming, and now that's directly linked in my case, for me it's linked to education. I believe that talking about these things, bringing these issues up and discussing them in a very rational way. It's not a failure of rationality what we see, it's a failure of people to act rationally.
Of course, there's many, obviously, that we're concerned about. Certainly, the evolving trend that families are breaking up, divorce rates are so high. It's just, in my opinion, in the church, destroying our society. It's really taking this country, it's taking its toll on our society, for sure, and on the individuals in the society. There's a lot of ways that we, in our church locally and generally, are trying to combat that. Of course, we teach our members the principles of sharing and love. Marriages are difficult, and that's never going to change. There's always a give and take. There's learning from each other. There's compromising, and there's accepting differences. But there's things that we can't control. Those are outside influences like the media, controlling finances. I mean, how many marriages are broken up by poor financial decisions, or mistrust, or financial decisions, or infidelity, pornography? These are plagues in our society that our church tries to just directly combat. And we do that by teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, by teaching principles, and allowing those principles to permeate the hearts of the members and to change their behaviors.
I think as we discussed, all the issues are important, and it's kind of difficult to pinpoint like which one is all being most. Obviously, as Dr. Randall explained, that it's the intolerance at different levels, intolerance at individual levels, at the society level, at different religious levels, and at the level of the nations. Like everybody thinks that, okay, whatever I'm thinking, that's the only right way to think, and everything else is wrong. It happens right from, that's how the marriages break, because each husband and wife think that whatever they are thinking is right. And probably they are right at each level, but they are also wrong at certain other level. There is like a famous story about like 5 blind people who were made to stand around an elephant. So one touched the trunk, one touched the leg, one touched the tail, and everybody described the elephant in that way. And probably everybody was right, but everybody was wrong also at the same time. So you have to kind of, like, rather than just going currently that, okay, this is the only right way, you have, if you try to sometimes think from the perspective of the other person, that also helps, not at every level again, at the society level. So that's the most important thing that causes the problems at different levels.
So the issue that I think that Christianity, particularly my flavor, the United Methodist Church, is preoccupied with right now is probably human sexuality. And while I welcome that debate, and I think that's an interesting discussion to have, I'm personally more interested in an issue that I think that a lot of people think is settled, which is systematic racism. Recently, the Black Lives Matter movement has been really important, I think, and powerful in the church. Being very segregated, being very white supremacist doesn't really address this underlying racism, I think, a lot of times. And so I think that probably the biggest issue for me right now in the social world is the ongoing assault and death of black bodies. And I think that saying Black Lives Matter isn't saying that white people don't matter and things like that, which is typically how it's responded to. It's not that saying Black Lives Matter is saying that they're the only lives that matter, but our system has already said that Black lives matter. Our system already believes that men's lives matter over women's lives, that heterosexual lives matter over homosexual lives, or people in the LGBTQ community. So I think that saying Black Lives Matter is saying Black Lives Matter also, Black Lives Matter too, and that they need to matter more in the way that we engage in the social world, because I think that it's a huge theological issue. And as far as some tools that you can get if you'd like to develop more of like a Christian understanding of ongoing issues with racism, Dr. James Cone is a theologian. He wrote a book called The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And in his book, he shows the reality that when people are killed by empires, by systems of injustice, just like Jesus was on the cross, that is played out in all kinds of different ways, such as the lynching tree in the Deep South, such as today when people are shot by policemen in the street. And so I think that when we see these bodies that are killed by systems of injustice, we can see those as an extension of the crucified body of Christ, and that they are theological issues.
Some of my students in here may have resonated with what you said. We just used Dr. Cohen's book this semester, so there's some resonation in that last statement. So when we think about one specific issue that seems to be crossing many different faith issues or faith areas in the place that even the Pope and the Roman Catholic tradition has spoken at length about, is the issue of creation care, issues of climate and climate change. And I wondered, in your own faith tradition, what does it say about caring for the earth and about climate change in your own tradition, your own path?
Well, we believe that God created the earth, and He's placed us as His children in a position of stewardship or responsibility to take care of it. And we also believe that He's placed the resources for our use, but again, to be used in moderation means that we use them responsibly and in a way that would benefit all of us.
I'm in full agreement. Obviously, I'm a biologist. That's why I work. We're actually using like WC, care for all my friends in biology classes next semester. So I think we've got this simple responsibility to take care of the natural resources. I think those resources are in full agreement, therefore used in a responsible and sustainable way.
So again, it's an ancient religion, and I believe a lot of things happened in the past. So, but just to make sure that the whole ecosystem maintained, everything in the Hindus was related to God. So the earth was considered as a god mother, and then that various trees are considered like related to gods and same animals, and so you are forbidden to cut trees and to protect the earth whatever way you can basically, and same thing with the animals and plants. So that's how sometimes it seems silly, like praying in front of a tree, but I believe when they started that notion, that was long time ago, that was just so that once everything is related to the God, you don't want to oppose it, so you just protected that way rather than just considering it as another tree and cut it and just forget about it.
So, of course, I think that caring for the environment is crucial to Christianity. I think that it's somehow, there's a bit of disconnect between the Bible and the way that Christians usually approach this as far as the social ethic. It seems that Christians would be more concerned with the environment and caring for creation, especially reading the very good proclamations in Genesis. But it seems that often there's the most denial, the most prevention of climate change, of trying to combat climate change happens within Christian communities. And I think that Pope Francis's encyclica is really important. I think that ongoing discussion about this is important. Personally, I found a lot of tools in ecofeminist theology that talk about how that we can care more for the creation by reimagining how that we see it. But also, I think that theological trends such as dispensationalist theology, which is fairly recent, saying that Jesus is going to come back and just destroy everything and all this stuff, I think that's kind of helped or hurt our ability to engage in these issues. And that it would help if we reimagine that material life, that the world matters to God, and that Jesus is redeeming it. Also, and of course, I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, and I know that this is like the epicenter of coal. And I know that's a very touchy issue, and people assume that any attack on coal is an attack on Kentucky or attack on miners. And I think that we need to talk about in this area how that we can make transitions into more green ways of using coal or maybe other resources, but also take care of the people that are working in these jobs. Obviously, a transition overnight is a bad idea. But I think that we need to have these serious debates and not be afraid to talk about these issues, especially in the church.
So, oftentimes when we think about our faith doing good to the community, many times it has to do or centered around the suffering that we see. And one of the great questions that so many different persons have asked in human existence is, why is there suffering and what can we do about it? And in your tradition, what does it say about suffering and how to alleviate suffering? That's a real life question, I realize.
So basically, again, in Hinduism, they believe in reincarnation and they believe in karma. So all the sufferings are kind of related to your past karmas, and they say that that's why there's emphasis to do good in this life path, because they believe that if you don't do, you will suffer in the next path. And it's not like anybody is punishing you. It's just like whatever. It's like one of the Newton's law. Like for every action, there is a reaction. So whatever you do, it's exactly the same thing will happen to you, or whatever, not the same thing, but it's the same karma will follow you in the next birth. So that's how they explain the sufferings. And obviously, by helping other people who are suffering now, you may get some help maybe next birth, and by accumulating good deeds, probably you will be better off.
Before we were born, we were presented with two plans. Satan presented us a plan where he would save everybody, but he would give no choice. And Jesus Christ stepped forward and said, I'll present a plan, it's Heavenly Father's plan, where people will choose. They'll have what we call free agency. They'll be able to choose to follow him. And when they fail to do so, he would provide a way to return to Heavenly Father by his suffering and his suffering, which we must get over. All those that are in this room and all those that are on the earth, born into the earth, chose to follow Jesus Christ. And we did so knowing that some of us would choose poorly. So when we talk about suffering, there's a lot of ways that we suffer, but unfortunately we are subject to the poor decisions of others, and that causes a lot of suffering, including even our family members who cause us suffering. It's not God's fault, and I'm sure that, and we believe that as Jesus Christ suffered for our sins, he also suffered for our sorrows, our pains, our sicknesses. And so try to imagine that when we suffer, Jesus Christ also suffered what we suffered. He knows exactly how to help us because he did literally suffer for everything that we suffer for. And we know that God's our Father, so just as I want the best for my children, and I feel sick. Even today, when my oldest daughter was telling me about how there's a girl that just keeps picking on her at school, and that makes me feel awful. But it makes me feel awful, it also makes her Heavenly Father feel awful. And my daughter says no. So I think that as we go through the difficulties in life, we should remember that even though we think we're alone and we're suffering and nobody can possibly understand us, that Jesus Christ does understand us and God is suffering and helping us through those difficulties.
Now, being on large in agreement with what you said, that every single person in this room, every single person on this planet faces some kind of suffering every day. Right? Whatever it is, but that's what life is. It's what we do with that suffering, how we respond to that suffering that I think is important.
So, does anybody here know what the Apple Festival is in Paintsville? Yeah. Well, a few years ago, I used to moonlight as a youth leader, so I was doing a youth service during Apple Day with my church, and one of the kids had heard about somebody who had passed away actually at Apple Day. Did anybody hear about that? Well, apparently somebody had a heart attack and died, and so this one kid in our youth group was really torn up about it, and he said, well, how can God allow this person to just die? His family was outside with caramel apples waiting on him, and they were having a good day, and it was just out of nowhere. And it came to me at that moment that, when Jesus died on the cross, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so there's this idea that maybe in asking that question, maybe in saying, I just don't understand this, we're more like Christ than we think that we are. And even God has experienced that dark night of the soul, that unknowing. And so ultimately, I think the problem of evil is unanswerable. There's certain emerging theologies that are trying to address it in new ways by taking out God's omnipotence, such as process theology or radical theologies. But I do like to offer what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said in his letters and papers in prison. He talked about how that we have the idea of God is like a big machine in the sky, that we're just, we put in 25 cents and get a piece of candy, like a gumball machine. And it's the idea that sometimes the idea of God up there watching everything, going to fix everything, ready to just give anything that we want, hinders us from taking real action in the world and seeing that we're ultimately the cause of a lot of evil in the world. There are, of course, things that are beyond human control, but I think that we need to take responsibility as radically free agents in the 21st century to try to minimalize the suffering and the evil that we encounter in the world. And while it's okay to ask God, and I think God is held accountable for giving us an answer to this, whether or not God will or whatever, I think that we, at the end of the day, also need to go out and try to minimize evil as much as possible.
I want to echo that and say that that's how I think we should approach our interactions with people. I mean, imagine your school teacher, imagine your classmates, imagine your family members. You just have no idea. We have no idea what kind of news they've just been presented with, or what kind of day they've had, and the suffering that they've gone through. And then for us to be impatient or unkind to somebody, imagine how that amplifies the suffering. Where we can just be a little more patient, more kind. I know it's hard for everybody. We all have the same. We all have struggles. But I think that's one way we can contribute to our communities and be better.
Last question before we open it up to our larger audience. Kind of going back a little bit, when you think about your own faith tradition, what has led you to be a member or to be a part of the path that you're on?
Obviously, for all of us, what started on the path is obviously we were born in respective families following the faith, I presume. And then it's like when you are growing up, certain qualities or whatever certain scriptures you imbibe. They are taught to you every day or whatever on different occasions. And I think as an adult, then it's up to you, like to decide, and you can scrutinize like what was right, because at some level they say that you don't have to accept anything. Basically, you can, because some things which were described long time ago were right at that particular time, thousands of years ago, but they may not be right at this time. But certain basic core values are probably still universal, and I think the only thing that helps me in following the faith is that there are no hard and fast guidelines. Basically, you just you can evaluate. There are a lot of stuff. There is a lot of literature that you can read, and you can argue with people who there used to be kind of discussions called shastras, in which people used to argue about the different points in the scriptures, and you can do it at the individual level. And the part of it is like the meditation is not only simply sitting and just closing your eyes, it's also constant evaluation of what's going on, what you should do, and what is kind of the basic guidelines are there. So all those things help me in cruising through the day-to-day life.
When I was 18, I just graduated high school. I took a job at Utah State University. I watered their lawns. It was the most brainless job you've ever seen. What I would do is I had a four-wheeler. I'd go down to they call it Old Main, big grass field, and it had these sprinklers that plug into the ground. So I'm from Utah, so you have to irrigate. You have to put sprinklers on the grass because it's a desert. So I put these sprinklers in, and they put it to about a 45-foot radius, and I sit there and let them go all day. And at the end of the day, I take them out. Brainless, right? 8 hours a day. So my mom caught on that I was still living at home. My mom caught on that I was doing nothing all day, but just watching these sprinklers and trying to find shade. So she said, well, why don't you take your scriptures with you and read? Because here I was preparing to go on a church mission. So I took my Book of Mormon with me, and I did what she said. I started reading, and I would read for hours there on that hill. And one day, as I was reading, just for the Book of Mormon is an ancient scripture, the inhabitants of the ancient Americas, just similar to the Bible. It's another testament of Jesus Christ. And as I was reading the Book of Mormon that day, it was as if I was transformed and I was there present with those. It was telling a story about how some missionaries were preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ to people who were very war hungry, very wicked people. And overnight they were all changed and followed Jesus Christ. And the power of the Holy Ghost came over me so strong that I knew that was the Word of God. And from that time forward, I had no doubt. I had a witness from the Holy Ghost. And there could be nothing stronger. And it's guided my life ever since.
So for me, definitely, my transition came very strongly at the University of UPIKE, of all places, but since I was a young man, I sat with people of numerous faiths. I sat with Islamic brothers in Ghana, around the fireplace. I sat with people in Australia and in Iraq. I stood on the rim of the Grand Canyon at night, late, when all the tour buses are everybody should do this. That was one of the greatest spiritual experiences of my life. Stand on the rim of the Grand Canyon and just listen. Listen to the universe, listen to God. It might be different for us, but there's a force, there's an energy. I can't always articulate what it is. That's why I'm a seeker. But it's there. It's there in each one of us, in each of ourselves, everywhere. And it's good. And that's it. I mean, for me, that has been that way for a long time. I find that satisfaction when I do my work. I find that satisfaction when I'm out with people I see it in the interaction between people. I see it in the interaction between me and my students. For the most part, unless I get close, right? But that's there. And it's that energy. There's a movement that's coming about. And I have to mention a book that I'm reading right now. Some other people. It's a Franciscan nun called Elio, and she's trained. She's got a PhD in immunology, pharmacology, and then got a postdoc at Johns Hopkins. Decided she wanted to become a nun. She's been working on this interaction, or this interface between science and religion ever since. There's also a great scientist named Stuart Kaufman that just wrote a book called Reinventing the Sacred. It's on complexity theory and stuff. And I think there's a lot of movement where we understanding those big words. I'm in awe of God, don't get me wrong. I just don't know how to define that God. It's out there, and it's in everything. I have not lost my sense of wonder for it, and not in judgment, but from my personal perspective, I've always had a problem. It's always been a very personal relationship for me. Ever since I was a little child, I felt the way my great-great dad feels it. But I've never felt that I needed, how can I say, a mediator in that relationship. It's always been very personal. And I know, and I'm not judging anybody else, but for me, that it's always been that way. So that's where it comes from.
By now, I think I'm convinced I'm probably a seeker too, in some sense. But no, sort of. Anyway, so I never had this big catastrophic experience where my whole world was uprooted and changed or something like that. I've always been a Christian, I guess, or always been a believer in whatever. I was baptized as a baby, like I said. We go through confirmation classes. We just keep rolling through the process, and so the difference, I think, is that the thing that's kept me in my specific tradition is I think that religious doctrines and religious symbols and ideas and the whole lexicon of religious imagery is a side of play, like a playground, where you can discover things and manipulate things and swing on certain bars or do flips. You can figure out cool things that are happening within the tradition. And so, all the theological ideas, all the things that have been developing, all the emergent theologies, feminist theology, black theology, Latin American liberation theology, eco-theology, all of these theologies are emergent from this Christian language that has been around for thousands of years, even longer than that in the Hebrew Bible. And so I think that what's kept me in this journey and going is that, yeah, I'm being drawn towards something with awe and reverence, but at the same time, I find really cool, just a really cool side to just play around and have fun and construct different ideas and play with concepts and work through things philosophically. And so I think that there's no reason that compelled me toward Christianity. It's just that I think it's so big that I could spend forever in it, just manipulating it, playing with it, figuring out new ideas within it.